Hello and welcome to February 1st, 2022. My name is Kurt and this is the Good Life Meditation. This is an activity that I do each and every morning, first thing when I get up, to remind myself of my life's objectives and principles and to see how I did applying these against the challenges of yesterday and the opportunities. How did I sleep through the night? Because that's a pretty good measure of things. And then to plan for the coming day. First, last night and yesterday, I had a challenging task at work. Lesson 3 of the 4-part training that I am creating. I wanted to record a demo for that to share with the team. And it turns out this lesson's harder than the other two, the first two that I've already completed. The main thing is the timing and getting everything covered. And I'm trying to do it in a hands-on manner so that the students can follow along. I might have bitten off a little more than I can handle in a single lesson. So, frankly, I didn't sleep so well last night because I was up at 3 a.m. thinking about it and trying to decide a new route forward for that. Might have an idea. We'll see. Not a big problem in the scale of things, but important for now. Anything else? Other than that, yesterday was pretty straightforward. Oh, there was a circumstance while I was walking the dogs. Hi, boys. Careful. While I was walking the dogs in the afternoon, that we spotted something suspicious, we being me, happening in the foothills of the desert. So there was a dirt road off by the wash, and I could see a car pulling back and was parked by the foothills there, and they had someone with a child had got out of the car and made their way up into the rocky area, and I saw another adult get out of the driver's side and stand and watch. And the adult with the child, had a big blanket or a tarp or something, and they were doing something that was far away and I really couldn't see. And they were covering the child and doing something. And at one point I saw them lift the child and kind of hold it back towards the other person. And I thought, this looks really suspicious. So I decided to get a closer look, and I started to make my way closer. They were a long ways off. I had to get across a busy road and then walk along the road there to get to it. And as I got closer, I decided that I'm not taking any chances. And I called the 911. I thought, if there's a patrol car in the area, maybe they can come by and just make sure there's nothing funny going on. And while I was on the phone with the 911 operator, I got close enough to see that I think they were doing photography. I think it was a photo shoot of some sort. And I told the dispatcher that I apologized for wasting her time, and I said that I think things are okay. So, a little bit of a tricky one there. I guess such a case, it's better to err on the side of caution and have an officer come by, but we didn't need it in the long run. Okay, so let's begin. The Good Life consists of 7 objectives and 30 principles, as follows. The first objective is to have my life in a state of readiness for death, so that if I keel over today, I leave my wife and daughter in the best financial situation that I can, and my relationships with them, again, in the best situation that I can, and whatever message I want to leave behind, namely my book, which tells my story, is done and ready to go. And if I die today, Emily will find it sitting right here, as well as other copies over there that I used in my shipping station to send out to people. And by the way, this is where the Good Life comes from. It comes from that book. Number 2 is to make good and effective use of my time so that I'm not letting the days slip like sand through my fingers. And when I reach the end, if I have a chance to think it over, I won't mutter about so much wasted time. Number 3 is to develop a good life creed. Literally that. A creed, a set of principles that will help me to live better. And that's precisely what this thing is that I'm reciting right now. This is my good life creed. And to maintain that, which is what I do by thinking about this every day, first thing in the morning. The next objective is to cultivate good emotional reactions so that I'm responding well to what happens through the day, not flying off the handle, nor taking things not seriously enough. There's a good balance of attention, response, and temperance. And I'm seeking to find that ground. Frankly, doing this out loud every day really helps in that capacity, compared to doing it in my head, which I did for a long time, and not at all, which doesn't get me anywhere. Next is the performance of good actions. Just finding ways to make the world better by helping others and tidying up this place we call home. Next is the recognition of true limits and true opportunity, to find where the margins are on my life of what is available and what I can do and what I can't. And to live, if not in accord with those, at least in recognition of them. Because sometimes I may try to push over those lines, or yield back far from them. Yeah, sometimes that latter too. And the last objective is to just do one thing at a time, at all times, and to do that thing slowly. Even if that thing is simply breathing easily when I'm asleep. I've got to do something until I'm dead. Yesterday, a friend on Facebook that I hadn't talked to for a while reached out kind of out of the blue and asked me, why do I go to the desert? And expressed their concern for my safety. I know the answer. It's right there in my book, but it was interesting to be asked that question. And I simply responded that I do so so that I can see the cold, dark emptiness of the universe behind the veil of activity that we enjoy as living creatures. Not death necessarily, but at least the substrate of which death is what death isn't. The substrate of what death isn't. Kind of like the ring of that. And then I finished with there's worse things than dying. I just thought I'd throw that out there. I thought that was an interesting little conversation that we had, or Facebook dialogue. All right, next is my 30 principles. Number 1 is the principle of war. To always be fighting against the things that I believe, trying to demonstrate where I'm wrong and at fault. And likewise, to do the same to anything that anyone else tells me is a truth that I should know and that I should abide. I'll do the same to that. And this goal goes along with principle number 2, which is the principle of reason, as reason is the tool that I use in the pursuit of that war. And reason has 3 sub-principles: to be honest, to be objective, and to be a skeptic. The third principle is called the Homunculus, which is nothing more than my reminder and remembrance that I do not have a soul, that I will be wiped out utterly when I die, that this sense that I have some nugget or granularity of self, this consciousness, is nothing more than an artifact of the biological processes that are going on in my brain and through my body. In fact, this consciousness will wink out shortly after my bodily functions cease, and it will never, ever, ever come back. That's where all the evidence points to. The next principle is called the Anchorhold, and it's an idea that the homunculus figuratively stands upon a rock in a vast sea, dark of death, cold, infinitely deep. You don't want to drop in that water. And each of us stands upon our own little rock with the waters rising and falling. And you're on your rock over there, and I'm on mine over here. And we wave at each other, and we shout, and the wind blows, and it's hard to hear. And the rain comes down, and sometimes the weather is nice, other times the sun burns. And it's a scary place to be, as life is a scary place to be. And very soon, one way or another, we're going in the water. And that's the end of us. And no one will ever occupy our Anchorhold again. It'll remain an empty outpost in a seemingly infinite sea of dark waters. Boy, sometimes my meditation gets gloomy, doesn't it? Well, life is gloomy. I mean, I'm trying to remember. I have a whole principle, the principle of fun at the end, dedicated to remembering the joy of life and to enjoy life. But it's also a serious business, taking on recognizing the great indifference and mustering a life around it. The next principle is the home of good and evil, which is my reminder that good and evil are not something out there in the stars, as there appears to be no deity on high that's giving us commandments of stone. We are instead responsible to develop our own principles and objectives to follow and to share and to negotiate, to debate, and to make our best living against. These good and evil, right and wrong, are not among the stars. They are right here in the actions that we make and the decisions that we choose. So choose well, choose deliberately, from a good foundation of understanding and active direction. Next comes the principle of purpose. My purpose is to be a virtuous man, working to help my daughter to grow into a serviceable adult for the community, who in turn has her own virtuous ambition, and to also promote ultimately my book, because it's my mission. So I label those purposes 3 sub-purpose, which are biology, the kid part, virtue, living well, where virtue is defined as the improvement of well-being, the objective improvement of well-being, particularly of thinking of creatures. You can boil it down to happiness if you want, but that happiness doesn't come at the expense of other happiness. But well-being is the good best label. And then mission. Okay, those are the first 5 principles. The next is the atomic principle. The idea that the universe is made of little bits and pieces, as Lucretius points out on the nature of the universe, citing Democritus about the nature of the universe. What a book. So in keeping with Lucretius and Democritus's observations, the universe is made of little bits and pieces, and so too you and I. And the atoms, they call it, as we do as well, fall apart, but they're never really destroyed. It's just void and atoms spinning in the void. Amazing how the confluence of ideas seem to align with how the universe really works. Democritus and Lucretius really were onto something. Epicurus as well, it seems. Next comes the principle of nature. Everything has some particular nature, including you and I, and it's good to recognize what that is so that we can live better in accord with the nature of the world around us and with the people that we interact with and with ourselves. Next is the pirate ride. This principle is simply my suggestion that free will is an illusion. This is an idea that I cannot prove. I don't know how to demonstrate that free will is an illusion, but I'm deeply suspicious that that's the case. And I try to sum the irony of, is it irony? I guess it is. No, it's not irony. The delightful challenge that the question of free will presents by suggesting that we do indeed, we are indeed free to make any choice we want in life. The rub is that we would never have made any choice other than the one that we actually did. Sorting that out, teasing the threads out of that riddle seemingly is maybe beyond me. But boy, do I suspect that's the case. It really changes things if that's true. It does. In a way it doesn't, because I tend to operate as though free will exists. I can't quite convince myself that's the case. Even though the thinking part of me is relatively convinced. Damn you, faith. Okay. Next is, after the pirate ride comes the maturity and the sub-principles of wisdom and fortitude. We are mature when we're wise in our remembrance of the past and strong in our application of that remembrance into the future. Next is the social principle. Humans need one another. We do much better. We thrive. We're more likely to thrive and be happy with others. So I try to pursue that. Even though I like my solitude, I want to be a man of family and friendship and community. Though I have a long way to go to get better on all of those things. I'm doing pretty good on the family one. That's been my main focus. I think I salvaged myself from that potential train wreck from the early days. Fortunately, I never did anything or said anything that I would desperately have to regret. Mostly, I just wasn't very good at it in the early days, but I'm much better now. I think I'm getting pretty. I'm serviceable now as a husband and father. Now I'm working on friend and community member better. The next principle is the public speaking. which is my reminder to communicate carefully, deliberately, and well. To keep my mouth shut unless I really have something worthwhile to say. And when I do speak, to use language that is slow, measured, and deliberate, with a vocabulary that is understood by others. No highfalutin stuff. Even if I have better words at my disposal, a good vocabulary at the ready, I won't use words that sound pretentious or may muddle my meaning, which is a bigger challenge sometimes. Because if you have a better way to say it, but it's a way that others aren't likely to be familiar with because they use antique words. I'm a fan of antique words, by the way. I like to read old literature. So, but I study those words not so that I can use them, but so that I can know them when I see them. And also the other part of public speaking is to not gossip, which is a sin in my worldview, a very desperate sin. I'm getting really good at that, by the way. It's very, very rare that you'll hear me talking about anybody else. And if I do, it's not for very long because I catch myself quick. Okay, next is, after public speaking comes the temperance and the sub-principles of suffering, simplicity, and apathy. Temperance, of course, is our ability to manage our consumption of life. How much we do, say, eat, drink, sleep, love, all of it, in measured quantities. Maybe always a little less than we'd actually like. That's where the sub-principles of suffering, because we suffer when we deny ourselves. Simplicity, because a simple life is a temperate life. And apathy, the ability to recognize what is outside of our control and to let that go. That's where these come in. The next principle is something called the horror show. And it is my sober reminder that truly, it's almost as though this was hell, this life. There's so many terrible things going on to people. Fortunately, not everybody at all at once, but doled out, meted out by the circumstance of life to people that I guess I'm a sensitive mind. Yeah, it's almost hard to bear. It's almost too much to bear, and I try my best to help out, but there's more suffering than I could possibly alleviate. So I'm very fortunate, though, that I rarely experience it. I live a very, dare I say, blessed life. But I want to remember that, so I remind myself daily that life is a horror show. That's why I recite this now at this point in the Good Life meditation. And then I try to straighten my back, clear my eyes, replace my glasses, steady my gaze, and get ready to move forward and be of service to my community and my family and my and life itself to the best of my ability. Okay, that's the horror show. The next principle is called that which must be borne. And this is just my reminder that there are things that we just have to carry and do. For example, if we decide to be a parent and a spouse, we have to service our marriage and we have to do what it takes to support our family, be that working at home or working in a job or tending to our kids, whatever that is, reconciling the differences with our spouse so that we can create and maintain the best home life that we possibly can under the circumstances. Next comes the Feast of Offal. Strange sounding principle, but this is my reminder that it's not uncommon for us human beings to explode when we've had enough, to rail at the universe and maybe even, make a show of ourselves in public or in the surroundings of our family, having a temper tantrum, and that others eat it up. there's kind of a voyeuristic delight in seeing someone else suffer and let loose and blow up. And when that happens, whether we're enjoying it in a strange way or being unsettled by it, we consume it. And then it festers within us, and then later it contributes perhaps to our own blowing up, our own Feast of Offal. So I try not to engage in any of that. I try to temper and manage whatever is fermenting inside of myself. I try to keep that from coming out. And then when other people are doing it, I will look away until the temper is over, and then I'll offer them comfort. All right, after the Feast of Offal comes distraction and another principle called agency and the great indifference, which we can take together. Agency and the great indifference are the apprehension of the deep emptiness that pervades the universe, and the deep emptiness beyond life that follows when we're dead. A lot of us don't want to see that, so instead we mask that with all kinds of activities that we do. This is the principle of distraction. We distract ourselves with our work and our families, our hobbies, all the while to keep our face from not apprehending the deep emptiness. As my friend asked me, why do I go to the deep desert? Well, I go to see it. I want to go alone so that I can face that empty universe and get to know it a little better, and then to write about it and come up with a counter proposition to it, which is the Good Life Creed. So I got a twofer there. Distraction and agency and the great indifference. The next principle is the best seat in the house, which is a suggestion that I can do well here, now, and who I am. That I will not strive to be anyone else or be anywhere else or be doing anything else, but I will make the best life out of the circumstance that I can. This doesn't mean that I can't move on. I can continue to have chapters and episodes of life in new circumstance, but I'm not doing so to escape. I'm doing so like a traveler who wants to see and experience new places. So it's a strange thing of being accepting of my circumstance, while all the while trying to make it better. The next principle is the Path of Wildness, which is my formula for breaking out of a circumstance in life that is unsatisfactory or that's not working well, and heading into some new life. And we do that by collecting facts towards a decision. We consider those facts and then make the decision. We give ourselves more time to a reasonable degree if necessary. And ultimately, if we need to, we'll tip the decision one way or the other with our gut influence. The key is to remember that even then we may make the wrong choice, and we have to accept the consequence of the choices that we make. Next is the risk of avoiding risk. Life has challenges and opportunities, some of which are sanctioned by our communities. Others are a little looked askance at. The sanctioned choices and decisions and activities are things related to developing a home and a family and a career. Everybody pretty much encourages us to go to school and get a job and buy a house and raise kids. The deeper level risk is if you feel drawn to find yourself and to do something that may be out of the ordinary or extraordinary. Probably going to find a little less encouragement from society towards those things because they tend to be more self-serving. Yet, for those of us that feel drawn to such things, there's something to be said for giving it a try, at least indulging for a period of time that type of living to, we try to find ourselves. So I recommend the decade of the 20s, particularly from the time when we graduate from college, 24 to 24-ish, until 30, 5-6 years of just time for yourself to go out into the world and explore and seek and make mistakes and try different things and, get her done. And then when you come back in your 30s, you can settle down to the life the sanctioned life, the normal life, having, as they used to say, sown your wild oats, but I don't mean that in the sexual sense. I mean it in the living sense. You'll probably be glad later on in life that you did that. You won't feel like you gave it up, because you really can't do it later. It's a mistake to say that I'll do it when I'm in my old age, because you won't be around anymore. That young man or woman from the 20s will be long gone. What will remain is a likely an older version of yourself that is more frail and weak and afraid and unable to have the adventure in the way you would. And even if they do, they can't capitalize on it because time is over. Their time is up. They may find some pearls from their experience, but they only get to gaze at them for a short while. Okay, next is after the risk of avoiding risk comes the sin and damnation. There are 7 sins in my world, and these are falsity, being untrue, credulity, believing things too quickly and without good reason, hope, desire without any plan of action, faith, where we believe something and cite the fact that we believe as the evidence to support the belief, which is as circular as it gets. Superstition, which is a category of belief that we're almost in agreement among our society, is nonsense. Dogma, belief because what we want to believe is written down in a book that's been around for a long time and is part of the tradition of the people that we spend time with. Authority, belief because someone that appears to know what they're talking about has said that this is true. Now that's different from scientific consensus, which is not authority. That is a reckoning among those who understand the subject and have reached a type of an agreement, a tentative, tacit agreement, that a hypothesis may be the best working model that we have to explain a phenomenon and to predict future phenomenon. That's very different from authoritarian belief. I don't believe a scientist because they have a PhD. I believe them because their hypothesis has been vetted by their peers, and they have the sanction of the community, of those who seem to have an understanding, a better understanding of the subject matter than I. It's the best form of the ascertaining of truth that I think our species has yet been able to muster. And then the final sin is, gossip, which I talked about already. And the consequence of these 7 sins, or maybe it's 8, is damnation in the here and now, as we live a life believing things that are untrue. The next principle is complete oblivion. Simply, as I've kind of alluded to a couple of times already this morning, simply the recognition that when we're dead, there's nothing left of us. We will be completely wiped out in our consciousness the moment that the brain shuts down, and then completely wiped out otherwise when our bodies are either burned up, rot in the ground, or are buried and eventually rot and decay, despite the embalming fluid. It's actually a pretty nasty way to go. Give me the fire, as Molly would say. But then after that, there will be no reconciliation with anybody, because we'll never see anyone again. There'll be no reunion, I should say, and no reconciliation. If there's no reunion, there can be no reconciliation. We can't, solve the issues that we left on bad terms with others. So we better do it now, and then we can have no final justice, because there's no afterlife, and there is no God to enforce and to dole out the justice, punishment to the wrong, to the evildoers, and paradise to the good. That all seems to be just a happy story, a reassuring story that we tell one another, so that we can go on with our more fearful life, cowering away, muttering prayers, and fingering a rosary, while life unfolds around us, and we promise ourselves a better day after this fearful event of life. This horror show is over. It's an easy way to resign ourselves to life, but I'd rather not do that. I'd rather face it. So again, back to that point, why do I go to the desert? So that I can face it. Because there's worse things than death. Next is the Great Life Adventure, which is just my suggestion to tuck in with one or more adventures at some point in life, preferably early, that will become our story and the centerpiece of our living, the thing that we reflect on, that we tell stories of, and that maybe forms the nucleus of the better living that we will soon live as a result of having had that experience. Then comes the next principle, which is the season of philosophy. This is just a note that for some of us, maybe all of us, there's a muse. It's just our mind. It's not really a muse. It's not anything other than us that whispers in our ear and suggests ideas that, if we listen, we can record them as they come flowing in, seemingly. That will be our story. Again, that's why I go to the desert. Another reason I go to the desert. My muse speaks to me there. The thing is that if we don't heed what the muse is saying when it is speaking, we'll lose it. It won't come back. And if it does come back, it'll have something else to say. And we can struggle to recapture the lines that we didn't set down, but they'll be gone. It'll be a labored effort, and incomplete, and quite unsatisfactory. So record when the muse speaks, as young or as old as you are, and be glad for the blessing of the opportunity to have something to say. And again, if you foster a life through a great life adventure, and good management of your time, giving yourselves that decade of the 20s, you'll probably have more to say in the end. Otherwise, you'll just have to refer to the canned stock answers that are offered on offer to all of us if we don't have anything else to say. No story of our own. There's plenty of people that will give you their story. The Bible is a good example. That's why so many focus on that type of thing later in life, because they have no story of their own, or at least no compelling story of life. They might have anecdotes of living, but no compelling story of life. So they look to the compelling story of death. Okay, next is the bullseye aim. We try to hit the mark, but we usually miss. Simple as that. Helped me yesterday. That happened yesterday. I had one thing. I was trying to hit the mark of that third lesson. I tried 3 times. I keep missing. And today I'll try a 4th, and maybe I'll hit it square or close enough to the mark to be serviceable for my needs. Next is the uphill climb. Life is a steady march up, 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 up. And if you turn around, the view gets better the higher you go, but only if you keep climbing. The next principle is arena and utility. Life is an arena for the pursuit of good living, using our objectives and principles as the tools along the way. Two more. Second to last principle is the nothing is enough, which is my daily reminder to attempt to get by with less. That if I have an option to have or not to have, it's better that I choose not to have. I don't always choose not to have, but I often choose to have, and then I choose to get rid of, which is not as good, but it's nearly so. And then the last principle is the principle of fun. Just to remind myself to enjoy life, to take on these important things, and to go into the desert, look at the great, apprehend the great indifference, have the adventures that are challenging, look at the horror show, carry the things that must be borne, but also have fun. And that's it. And now, let's talk about the day. Today I have a meeting in the morning where I do a presentation at 8:30. Presentation's all ready to go. I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be fun. After that, I have I'll try again to get that lesson I want to do in documented. Try it if I can get it down and record it to share with the team. I think I'm getting close. And then I have another meeting in the afternoon that I imagine will go pretty straightforward. And today's the first day of February, so I need to get really started in earnest on another big project. That's why I was hoping to finish that other thing yesterday, but I didn't. So I might have to do both of those today. Things are going to get a little more busy at work, which is good. And I'll just try to live well through the day. Be ready for the ambush. Be ready to keep moving forward. Well, I wish you all the best. Remember to be safe, but not too safe.